On March 29th, 1997, right in the heart of Jacksonville, Florida, three security guards were locked inside a massive vault, surrounded by millions of dollars in cash. While they were busy with their routine, one of the guards suddenly turned around and froze. Standing right behind him was one of his fellow guards, pointing a loaded gun straight at his face. At first, he thought it was just a bad joke. He laughed and said jokingly, "Come on, man, put the gun down. Let's finish up and get out of here." But the guy holding the gun, he wasn't joking at all. He was about to pull off one of the boldest and most expensive heists of the 20th century. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a man you'd never believe was a criminal. He spent his life guarding other people's money, with loyalty, discipline, and pride. But after years of pressure, stress, and constant mistreatment on the job, something inside him broke. He got sick of his life. And he came up with a plan, a daring plan, to carry out the most valuable theft of the entire century. And with shocking ease, he managed to steal 1/2 ton of cash, 500 kilograms of cold, hard money. It all started in Jacksonville, Florida, home to a local branch of a company called Loomis Fargo. Loomis Fargo specialized in protecting money for businesses and retail stores around the city. They handled transportation, security, and vault storage for millions of dollars in cash every day. Usually, they'd send out armored trucks to collect cash from their clients. Guards in full-body armor would get out, collect the money, and load it into the trucks, which would then head back to the company headquarters. And that headquarters? It was like a fortress. Steel vaults, armed guards, high-res security cameras, even thermal surveillance. The place was practically impenetrable. That's why Loomis Fargo was considered one of the most secure spots in the U.S. to store money, right after the National Treasury and the Federal Reserve. But despite all that security, the fatal blow came from inside. And the man behind it? Someone no one would have ever suspected. The guy whose life was in constant danger, day after day, the most loyal, most trusted employee on the team, Philip Johnson. Philip was born in Jacksonville back in 1964. His job at Loomis Fargo? Hauling cash. He'd stand at the back door of stores that needed their money picked up, take the heavy duffel bags stuffed with cash, and carry them, on foot, to the armored truck. It was a job that required serious guts. He had to be trained, focused, and totally fearless, because every time he stepped outside with all that money, he was a walking target. The other guards were spread out between the trucks and the stores, watching his back. But Philip? He was the one exposed. Always. And if you think I'm exaggerating about how dangerous his job was, listen to this. Philip survived 11 armed robbery attempts. Yeah, 11. He was shot at over and over. 7 times he got seriously injured and had to be hospitalized. But every single time he came back to work in less than a week, like nothing ever happened. Now you'd think a guy like that would be making top dollar, right? Wrong. Philip wasn't even a full-time employee. He was making just $7 an hour. No health insurance, no job security, no compensation if he got hurt or had to quit. In other words, he was risking his life for practically nothing. Still, he had no other option. So he stuck with it for 10 long years. But by 1997, when he turned 33, he'd had enough. He told himself, "That's it. I'm done. Time to fix this mess." And that's when he made the decision that changed everything, to rob the very company he had served so loyally. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. Philip had been thinking about it for years. planning it in his head, dreaming about it night after night. According to sources, Johnson spent 5 whole months thinking about the heist. But during that time, he didn't take a single real step. He just sat around, daydreaming about the luxurious life he'd live once the plan was done. And the actual plan? It only took 8 hours to put together. Yep, 8 hours total, spread out over 4 separate days. In other words, he didn't exactly wear himself out planning, but still, the plan worked flawlessly. Thanks to his years working at the company, Johnson knew the rules inside and out. He knew exactly when the best time to strike was, and who would be around when he did it. Now sure, Loomis Fargo had armored vaults, hundreds of security cameras, and a building full of armed guards. But the truth is, the company was spending close to $1.5 million a year on advertising alone. Their whole brand was built around one image: the safest vault in America. They even had U.S. senators and big-name influencers backing them up, promoting that image. They paid a fortune to protect their reputation. But Johnson? He knew the real story. He knew that only one vault in the whole building was actually used to store cash. The others were empty. And he knew that no matter how secure it looked on the outside, the place had fatal weak points. So Johnson decided the heist would happen inside the headquarters, not out on a transport job. And he picked the perfect time, the day before the mid-year holiday break. Why? Because that's when most employees left town early to spend the holiday with their families. Roughly 70% of the guards would be gone, which meant the number of people inside the building would drop by 2/3. And thanks to his close relationship with the shift supervisor, Johnson was able to influence the list of people scheduled to stay on during those first 2 days. He made sure they were all new hires, inexperienced, never exposed to robbery threats before, and way more likely to surrender if they thought their lives were on the line. And there was another reason the timing was brilliant. About 90% of Loomis Fargo's clients, the businesses and stores, would also be closing for the holiday, which meant they'd all be depositing their cash into the vault right before leaving town. In short, the vault would be holding the biggest amount of money it ever held all year. And just like he planned, everything fell into place. At around 6 a.m. on the morning of the job, Johnson left in the armored truck with the driver. They spent the entire day collecting money from different stores. By 6 p.m., the truck was stuffed with cash, over $9 million. When they got back to HQ, the front gate guards did a routine check, verified Johnson and the driver, and waved them in. Johnson got out to unload the money into the vault, helped by 2 other guards waiting inside. One was Terry Brown, a guy battling severe depression and attending group therapy. The other was Dan Smith, young, inexperienced, unarmed, and dealing with a chest condition that made it hard for him to breathe, let alone fight back. Now Johnson had one last problem. Inside the vault, everyone had to hand over their weapons. Company policy. All firearms were locked away in the guard room near the front gate. So how could Johnson pull this off without a weapon? He took a gamble. He hoped there'd be a gun tucked away inside the control room, the security office. If he found one, he'd go through with it. If not, he'd bail and try again during the next holiday. Before they started moving the cash, Johnson asked Dan Smith to come with him to the security room. He said he wanted to take off his body armor and grab a drink of water. And since Johnson had a rep as a loyal, trustworthy veteran employee, Dan didn't think twice. The 2 of them walked in. Johnson casually took off his vest and acted completely normal. Then suddenly, He asked Dan for a toothpick. Dan laughed and said, "Man, where am I supposed to get you a toothpick from in here?" Johnson smiled. "Let's check the drawer. Maybe we'll get lucky." And as they opened the top drawer, there it was, a handgun. Johnson spotted it and grinned inside. Everything's going exactly as planned. He wrapped up the little act and said, "Hey, don't worry about the toothpick. Let's just get back to the cash." And just like that, they walked out of the room, one of them clueless, the other fully armed. The thing is, there were only 4 people in the building during the money transfer. The 3 guards, Brown, Smith, and Johnson, and the armored truck driver. Just 15 minutes in, the driver finished his job and left. From that moment on, only the 3 guards remained. Brown, Smith, and Johnson kept hauling bags into the vault. But Johnson noticed something odd. The vault was already stacked, way more money than what they had collected that day. Something wasn't adding up. But he didn't say a word. He just kept moving bags, playing it cool, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came at exactly 6:45 p.m. Johnson casually said, "Y'all keep loading the cash. I'm just going to hit the bathroom real quick." Still holding a bag, he walked off like it was nothing. But Johnson didn't head to the bathroom. He went straight to the surveillance room, shut down all the cameras, threw on his bulletproof vest, grabbed the gun he'd stashed earlier, and ran full speed to the company garage. He had to get there before the vault's security system locked completely. Waiting for him was his getaway ride, a plain white van he'd bought just for this job, not his usual Ford. That thing was too cramped. This van had space, privacy, no logos, nothing suspicious. His plan was solid. If the cops caught him during the escape, he wouldn't fight. He'd just give up. He knew that kind of crime wouldn't land him more than 6 years max. 6 years for a shot at millions? He'd already done the math. All or nothing, he told himself. Let's roll the dice. Then he walked right back into the building, carrying a special duffel bag he'd prepped ahead of time. At the vault, Brown and Smith were still working, had no idea what was about to happen. Johnson raised the gun, calm, focused, dead serious. "Drop everything," he told them. "Back away from the vault. Nice and slow." At first, Brown thought it was some kind of prank, but one look at Johnson's face told him this wasn't a joke. This was a man with a plan, no screaming, no struggle. "On your knees," Johnson ordered. "Hands behind your back." They obeyed, not a word. He cuffed their wrists and ankles like a pro. Quick, efficient. Then he dragged Brown to a tiny janitor's closet, locked the door. Came back for Smith. Same deal. And just like that, they were out of the game. What's crazy is, they didn't even try to fight. Not a punch, not a shout. Some folks later said it looked like they were in on it. But truth is, they just didn't care. Turns out most employees at the company were miserable, treated like dirt, paid barely enough to survive. One internal survey even showed that 80% of the staff said they wouldn't risk their lives to stop a robbery. So Johnson took full advantage. He went back to the vault, grabbed the first bag, stuffed it full with hundreds, 50s, and 20s. No hesitation. Loaded it into the van. He had 2 options. Take one bag and leave safe, or go big and clean out the vault. He chose option 2. But before going for round 2, he checked the janitor's room again. Made sure Brown and Smith were still tied up, still scared. They were. "Please, man, just don't hurt us," they begged. He gave them a quick nod and shut the door again. Then it was go time. Trip after trip, Johnson hauled bag after bag from the vault to the van. No alarms, no cameras, no witnesses. He didn't even bother counting. He just kept moving until the van was stuffed to the brim. By the time he was done, it was almost 10 p.m. Then he headed back into the building, straight to the surveillance room, yanked out all the tapes. No footage, no evidence. Then over to HR. He found his own employee file, shredded it to pieces. He wasn't a regular staff member anyway. He was a contractor. No strong paper trail, easy to vanish. Next, he accessed the building's electronic security system, locked every single door from the inside, then programmed the system to reopen automatically at 12 noon the next day. That gave him a solid 14-hour head start. But he wasn't done yet. He returned to the vault with a bottle of rubbing alcohol and started wiping down every single surface he'd touched. Door handles, keypads, railings, even the cuffs on the guards. No fingerprints, no trace. Then finally, he headed back to the janitor's closet, opened the door, looked at the two terrified guards, and said, cool as ice, "All right, fellas, come with me." During the investigation, Guard Brown stated that, even though the cleaning supply room reeked, the space was tiny. He suffered from shortness of breath, and the fear of death loomed over him. When Johnson came back and told them they could leave, both he and his partner begged to stay inside. That's how terrified they were of Johnson. But Johnson insisted on moving them. He took them one at a time to the van, opened the back doors with his own key, and locked them in tightly. Then came the twist. When Johnson went to open the driver's side door, he realized it was locked, and the keys were still inside the van. He had no choice but to break the window, which he did without hesitation. Once inside, he finally drove off from the building at exactly midnight. Now here's something important. According to company policy, external security guards weren't allowed to leave their stations or enter the main building under any circumstances. So everything going down inside? They had no clue. When Johnson drove off, the van clearly looked heavy, like it was carrying something serious. But the gate employee didn't pay it much attention. He let Johnson pass without checking the vehicle, totally unaware there were two bound guards sitting silently in the back, blindfolded and unsure of what was even happening. Johnson headed to his house. Once there, he took Smith out of the van, carried him into the bedroom, and locked him inside the closet, tying him up tight. Before shutting the door, Smith pleaded, "Please, just don't leave me in here too long." Johnson laughed and said calmly, "Don't worry, the company will come get you tomorrow." Then Johnson got back in the van and drove to a nearby forest. There, he took out Brown, sat him down next to a tree, and tied him up with rope. He said, "I picked this spot just for you, because I know you have breathing problems. Here you'll get fresh air and clear your lungs from that nasty smell in the cleaning room." He even left him some canned food and said, "If you get hungry, help yourself." Surprisingly, Brown, despite everything he'd been through, thanked Johnson and sat there quietly. It was unbelievable how calm and polite those guards were. Later, Johnson's story would go on to inspire several films and documentaries, and in all of them, the guards were portrayed as heroes, guys who fought back to protect the company's money. But the truth, according to official sources, those guards were just really nice guys who didn't put up a fight. After that, Johnson vanished without a trace. The theft wasn't even discovered until the next day. Weekend shift guards tried to enter the building but found every door locked. At first, they thought it was just a system glitch. It was the weekend after all. But after an hour and a half with no response from inside, they finally managed to get in. At first glance, everything seemed normal, but once they entered the security room, they found chaos. They immediately reported it to the company board, who then contacted the police. The police showed up quickly, but there were no obvious signs of a robbery. The vault door was shut tight, and everything looked normal. Now, according to U.S. federal law, any large cash storage is considered an official responsibility of the FBI, so they had to bring in the Bureau. They were the only ones who had access to the vault's emergency keys alongside the company. It took a few hours, but by 11 a.m., the vault was finally opened. And that's when it all came to light. They were looking at one of the biggest heists in the country's history. The initial estimate? $10 million stolen. They checked employee logs and saw only 3 guards were present during the heist. At first, the authorities thought they were in on it. Massive manhunts were launched to find them. But suspicion started to fade once a new theory took hold. Maybe the guards weren't accomplices. Maybe they were hostages. That theory gained traction quickly. All 3 had spotless records, no prior infractions, and their co-workers vouched for them, calling them among the best employees the company had. It later came out that the company paid the FBI a lot of money to keep things quiet. They imposed a total lockdown. No employee could leave or contact anyone outside during the investigation. The company feared this going public could trigger a financial meltdown, not just for them, but for the entire economy. Even the FBI, understanding the stakes, cooperated in keeping the matter under wraps. A scandal this size could have shattered trust in the banking and insurance industries and sparked a financial panic. But no matter how hard they tried to bury the story, the truth was just too big to hide. By 8 p.m., the whole world was shaken by a breaking headline. Philip Johnson, the ordinary security guard, had stolen $18 million, over 1,200 pounds in weight. During the investigation, authorities made a shocking discovery. Johnson's employment file was missing from company records. The first move? They raided his house, and when they opened the home safe, they found Smith, the missing guard, tied up inside, barely conscious, in and out of awareness. While searching the place, they also found drafts, detailed robbery plans, some dating back to 1992. That meant Johnson had been planning the heist for 5 years. One paper, dated 1997, outlined the plan inside the facility in great detail, yet said nothing about what he'd do with the money afterward. The strangest part? The house walls were covered with heartbreaking phrases like, "How long will I remain unloved? How long will I live without a wife or kids?" The police realized this man was under serious emotional pressure. Just an hour after the raid, a call came in from a Boy Scout troop. They'd found Brown, the other guard, tied to a tree near Mount Pisgah outside Asheville, North Carolina. He was rescued and taken in for questioning, and then came the big twist. Fargo Security Company offered a $2 million reward for any information leading to Johnson's capture. The FBI added an extra $500,000 in bonuses, but nothing. 4 whole months of searching, no sign of Johnson, no sign of the money. They even went on national TV, publicly pleading, "Come back and return the money. We'll cut you a deal." Still, Johnson had vanished, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Until August 17th, 1997, at the Texas-Mexico border, an officer was checking passengers from a bus returning from Mexico. One man had nothing but a driver's license, no passport. He was blonde, clearly not Mexican. When questioned, he gave a weird answer. "I was just visiting a friend." The officer became suspicious. She searched his bag and found $10,000 in cash. She took the license to run a check, and that's when the shock hit her. The name said Roger DeLauder, but the license was fake, and the man in front of her was none other than Philip Johnson. Calmly and professionally, she arrested him and handed him over to the FBI. Even though he had changed his look completely, long beard, thinner body, and makeup to alter his face, the border agent had recognized him. And when the FBI agent saw him for the first time, he gasped and said, "That's Johnson, not Roger." For 10 straight days, they tried to make him talk. They kept asking where the money was, but his answer never changed. "If it had been any company other than Fargo, I might have told you." When they lost hope, they investigated every asset under the name Roger DeLauder. Eventually, they found a rented home in New Mexico. Inside, they discovered a receipt, a payment for a storage unit. Agents rushed to the location, opened the storage locker, and found nearly all the stolen cash. Only about $100,000 was missing, money Johnson had spent in Mexico. But what really broke everyone's hearts? On the walls of the storage unit were the same sad phrases. "How long will I remain unloved? How long will I live without a wife or kids?" His trial? Just one hearing. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, no parole. On top of that, he was forced to work an office job with zero pay for Fargo Company to repay a $60,000 penalty. Just like that, the freedom he'd dreamed of turned into 25 years of forced labor. And the craziest part? Just a few months after Johnson's heist, Fargo security got robbed again. Different place, different method. Tell us in the comments. Was it Fargo's mistreatment of their employees that drove Johnson to steal? Or was he always going to do it, no matter what? And if you love mysterious stories, check out our last video on the Lloyd's bank robbery, where some say it wasn't a crime, but a cover-up by British intelligence to protect a royal family scandal. See you in the next video. Goodbye for now.